Okay. Bow.
In the Buddha's teachings, there's something called the three poisons.
Yes.
Passion, aggression, and ignorance. And the one I find most challenging is ignorance. What kind of ignorance is this, and how can I work on it?
So probably the simplest way that ignorance manifests as is distraction. That's an easy way to see it. You can kind of remember that you were just distracted. So you can look at that situation and see that you were either distracted through just out and out disinterested. You're not interested in that, so you start looking at deliberate distraction, looking for something else, looking for entertainment. And so that would be one way to begin to track it. Notice when you're looking with, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, anything, and you move to something else. That's called ignorance. That's the most obvious contrasted form of ignorance. The other kind of ignorance is just a style of ignorance we call a Buddha family, or someone who's just not available to much of anything other than their own thought patterns. So anything that occurs in front of them has to go through a strong filter of preconceptions, ideas, opinions, beliefs, and so on. So someone who is operating out of strong ignorance really doesn't even know who they're talking to. They might remember their name, they might remember something about them, they might remember a few things they said, which are probably translations or interpretations or elaborations on what the person said, rather than what they actually said. So ignorance shows up as distraction and just a kind of a blanket shutting down. More?
So could it also be considered a preoccupation with something else? So I could be face to face, for instance, with you or with anyone, and I find my mind wandering to somewhere else something I need to do in the next hour or next day or whatever.
Distraction caused by just wanting things to be different than they are, wanting to worry that something, if you don't think about it, it won't get covered.
So is there a remedy for this?
Yes, sit down and meditate, face the wall. Strengthen your awareness so that you can see and witness more of what the mechanics of that particular ignorance, that part of the three poisons, passion, aggression, and ignorance, how that is functioning. You can't actually stop something you don't understand. And even if you understand something, you may see that it can't be stopped. But that still is awareness. What I say? Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking for a methodology, perhaps. So I'm talking with somebody, and I find myself being distracted by something else.
Yes.
So in that moment, what would be the appropriate action?
It would, there'd be a lot of dependency there, a lot of depending on, depends on this, depends on that, depends on them, it depends on the situation, depends on the actual dynamic between the two of you. There's so many things. We can come up with lots of things. But probably the best remedy for that is to stay in your senses. You have, besides the mind, which is cranking up tons and tons and ideas and thoughts and hopes and fears and commentary on everything, elaboration on everything that occurs. You hear a sound, there's all kinds of thoughts come up around the sound, who caused it, what it is, so on and so forth. So a remedy, if that's what you're asking for, would be to, the other five senses are also active and they're also receiving, and you could move some of that awareness or perhaps all of that awareness alternately into the sense consciousnesses so that you stabilize here, so that you're in what is commonly called a present moment. Gravity, how your clothes feel, the colors of the person in front of you, the colors they're wearing, their body language, or posture, I should say, rather than, it's not language in the term of information coming from there. I'm not talking about analyzing what somebody's body posture means necessarily. I'm just saying that there's a kind of information about the way a person is handling their body that will tell you a lot about them. Just like, what did I just do with my hands?
You put them down here.
Before then, what did I do?
I'm not sure.
I did this. Not that that's all that important, but you missed it.
Is that ignorance?
Yes. And one of the ways that ignorance occurs is by focusing on what's in front of you. Have an agenda about what's in front of you. So you miss what's happening. You miss the body movement that happened over here. And it's not that seeing that body movement over there is somehow going to give you some kind of power over things necessarily. It's just about awareness. It's not necessarily about who controls what more.
So how does recognition of ignorance relieve suffering?
The recognition of the ignorance won't necessarily relieve the suffering. It's a provisional teaching that has to do with seeing the way the structure of ego operates and the kind of energy it uses and the way that energy manifests as pushing, pulling, shutting down. It's just a beginning. It leads to the insight, the basic insight of Buddhism. The teaching of the Buddha is emptiness, or shunyata, or direct perception of the nature of reality, which is not separate. And so one has to see that before there's anything that could be considered liberation from suffering. And even then, there's no guarantee of anything. When you guarantee anything, that's cheap from the point of view of a spiritual path. That's a mundane path. I'll do this if you do that. If you do this and that'll happen, do this and that'll happen. That's not the way meditation works, awareness practice, or the spiritual path. More?
So can we know when we are not acting out of ignorance?
To some extent, you'll start to get flashes of not knowing what to do next, and you'll get flashes of having no reference point, and you will occasionally not be concerned about negative emotions and activity coming and going. You just won't have a strong concern about it.
Is there some recognition of that, though?
Somewhat.
Is it possible to stay in the present moment?
First of all, there's an assumption there's a present moment. And then there's the idea of staying. You don't have to stay anywhere. That's a misunderstanding. To stay somewhere means that there's something else you're avoiding. This is why the ego mind does not want to do this. Any of you here come into this situation or a situation of awareness practice, you're in for it. So I would highly recommend you don't do it unless you have to. And if you have to, I'll help you. If you don't have to do it, go do something else. Spend your life doing something else. And I'm not just joking. But if you're here, then it's a mutual thing. I will help you. We'll do this. I'll help you do it. It will not be easy. More? Next victim. Because this is Kozan.
I've never done this before.
Well, good. It's a beginner's mind then. Bow. Bow wow.
So kind of going on Unyo's questions about passion, aggression, and ignorance, and tying into yesterday's Dharma talk.
What's the title of that?
How to be perfect.
Great talk.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
The perfect talk.
So it seems that when we practice meditation, we start to see that some of our activities that we were doing before for entertainment were shutting down on what you know, we hadn't seen before, but there's some kind of feeling that it needs to be looked at. And when some of that stuff comes up that needs to be looked at is in the form of anger or aggression or some kind of activity that seems like it caused harm and maybe cause more suffering, turn the wheel again and again. As we start to see that and feel like we cannot stay in our skin anymore, I mean, and you say sit more all the time, is there a point where we should go do something else, or
Yes.
how will we know?
So it's a matter of if you're doing a lot of sitting, you're going to be more clear on when you can do something other than sitting, like go for a walk in the woods or do something different, you know, go bowling or whatever. Maybe go out and sit on the porch swing and don't particularly hold still as you would in meditation practice. But it would be up to you. You'll know if you the practice of sitting meditation, of sitting on a cushion and facing a wall for several hours a day, day after day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Eventually, you begin to have a kind of trust in what's happening, which is not a belief. Belief is fear. Disbelief is fear. Trust is seeing the fundamental nature of what is in front of you all the time. The only way you can do that I know of, and I'm sure there are other places where this may be talked about differently, is to look at what is in front of you all the time. And to do that very simply, sit down, find a wall, find some carpeting, and just look at it and watch what the mind cranks up around something that is very, very simple. There's not much in the way of sound, touch. There's just your butt on the cushion of the chair, your clothing, and what's in front of you. A very simple display of phenomena in all the six sense fields, including the mind. Observe those. Observe. That's how you train yourself so that you recognize, you see what is necessary to do and what is not necessary to do. I sometimes say, I'm saying now, if you completely understand this, you won't make any more choices about anything. You'll no longer evaluate anything. This doesn't mean you won't get happy, get sad, get mad, get angry, get depressed. All those emotions may pass through your sensorium, your mind field. That's with a D. Mind. Huh?
Capital.
Yeah, capital D. May pass through there, but those emotions will not find a self to cling to. If they find a self, then there's going to be warfare on some level, or struggle, or some kind of angst or anxiety. But if they don't find a self, then they just come and go. There's in the Tibetan tradition, this is called rangjung, or self-liberation. It's self-liberated. It doesn't have any fuel supply going to it. So it comes and it splits. Next.
Well, if there's nothing to stick to, but as you said before to Unyo, the ego is really, I don't know how you said it, but pretty insistent. And when we uncover its, maybe reveal some of its enterprise, it seems to get stronger in its demands.
Uh-huh.
So, you say it doesn't, the emotions, there's no self to stick to, but is the feeling still going to be the same?
So? Keep coming. So?
I don't know.
I know. No self. There's no self to know. The no self is the case right now. But we grasp at some kind of identity in order for it to have a reference point. More?
Let's say in our practice we go through a difficult period, seeing things about ourselves that we didn't even know before. And it's got some volition or kinetic energy. So off the cushion, we can say, I'm going to just sit here, no matter how it feels, I'm just going to keep sitting. But off the cushion, some of the stuff that's come to the surface is sort of engaged at the surface. And you might go off and pop somebody where you wouldn't before. So how do you work with that off the cushion when it's sort of open the lid on some things?
Start on the cushion, because now repeat what you said on the cushion. Just a little bit of what you said. You're on the cushion, and you said, okay, I'm going to, what?
Sit still no matter what comes.
Yeah, this is extra. Anytime you coach yourself on the cushion about, instead of just coming and sitting without any plus, minus, or neutral agenda, you're just sitting. There's no one sitting. There's no congratulatory words happening. There's no comment like, I'm just gonna. This is extra. And you carry that I'm just gonna out into the world, and the awareness is left stuck to the wall. So I would say take that with, when I say take that with you, I'm really saying don't abandon it. Don't abandon the clarity that is there about your neurosis. When you're sitting and negative feelings are arising, that is your liberation, not separate from the Buddha. Any negativity you're feeling is the Buddha from the point of view of this teaching, because it's not separate. It is complete emptiness. It is complete suchness. But it needs to be seen. You need to see. We all need to see this. If you don't see this, you'll continue to fight with your world, make friends with your world, and then fight, and then make friends, and then ignore. Passion, aggression, and ignorance. Yes, go ahead.
So it seems like it's important to make friends with the negativity here.
Yes.
There's right now a whole bunch of negativity that you can get swept up in the world. How do you make friends with the negativity of what seems to be?
Get swept up. If you're doing a lot of sitting, then the way in which you get swept up is going to be a lot different than the person who has no awareness practice at all, no spiritual path at all. They're just totally locked into the 8 worldly dharmas of success, failure, right, wrong, life, death, all the polarities that feed off their opposite. It's called duality. There is no separation between the two poles of duality. It just looks like there is, and so therefore we make a big deal out of everything. So there may be a feeling of being swept up, but who's having that feeling? Is there someone having that feeling, or is it just a feeling? And if it's just a feeling, do you say it's just a feeling? Because if you do, that's more ego. No comment, no evaluation, no grade point average, no credential. Do it.
So what if you see making a comment?
Then don't comment on the comment, like I shouldn't be making comments. Extra, extra. We always want that lamination on the outside that gives the ego form some kind of protection, like a cocoon, which is the metaphor that Trungpa Rinpoche used in the early Shambhala teachings for the isolation of the self-centeredness to protect it from any kind of revelation that it might be empty of a self. And make a cocoon of just someone's opinions or a cocoon. If you talk to someone about something and say, well, I've always thought that's just ego. I've always thought, well, I was taught, well, I've always felt, this is just more not wrong. It just shows you that people isolate in different ways using their ideas, convictions, beliefs, and so on. Someone who is aware, someone who is realized, and means that they see that there's no separation. Separations, yes, but no fundamental separation. They don't really believe or disbelieve anything. They're both astonished and bored at the same time. Yeah, buddy. More?
It seems like, does a path usually, we got time?
We do, go ahead.
Get
I'm
more
watching.
difficult? You go into it more and there's things uncovered.
Yes.
It's generally going to get more difficult as ego tries to hang on for the last hurrah.
It can, more than likely it will, for someone going into this fully with their, dedicating their whole life to it, as someone who is a monastic does, has to do. They shouldn't be doing that. It's like I was saying earlier, don't do this unless you have to. Don't do it. Because you don't want to go into this and then turn around and go out. Then you create another kind of situation that might take you 1,500 lifetimes to see. And that's not a threat, and it's not even the truth. It's just a way of talking about it. I don't know anything about that. More?
Sometimes in the Zen tradition, they talk about leaping off the cliff.
Yes.
There's metaphors like that. So
Yes.
how do you don't know the details of the grasping or the hanging on, but you know that there's some. So how do you just jump?
First, you see the metaphor that I sometimes use is the cliff, but there's also the 100-foot pole. Learning the teachings, you climb the 100-foot pole, you get to the top, and you're at the end of the pole, and you step off the 100-foot pole, which is a metaphor, of course, for realization, or just no longer being attached to anything, including the teachings. It's like a raft going to another shore. When you get to the other shore, you don't drag your raft around with you.
So how do you step off?
See the way you're hanging on. If you see the way you're hanging on, this will help you. And then if you really see the way you're hanging on fundamentally, at the same time you will see, if I may say it this way, you'll see that there's no one hanging on. So there isn't anything to let go of. There's no one to let go. There's no let goer, and there's no letting go. There's just reality, and you're no longer objecting to it or clinging to a solid, separate being away from what is true.
So how do you see no self?
Face the wall a lot. Look at yourself until you see that it's empty of any person or individual.
How does that help?
May not.
So I have to trust your word.
I wouldn't go that far. Don't believe anything. Don't believe me. Don't believe anything. But if you are interested in seeing the truth for yourself, then this is how it's done. It's a do-it-yourself project. Probably going to need help from the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. How much you need is different for each person. Some people need to become totally glued to this as a monk. Some might have realization without becoming that glued.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Chiezan, what's up?
How can you live a sane life and not get rid of the intense negativity that we experience?
So we experience intense negativity, and it seems to be necessary to continue to look, observe, feel the texture of that negativity without leaving it to blame or leaving it to credit or leaving it in any way to further evaluate, judge that situation. And through doing that, the fundamental underlying belief in a separate being who's experiencing any kind of feelings at all begins to be transparent. And it takes time. We just have to keep coming back and coming back. And it can be painful because it seems to be easy to just, well, I'm just going to step out of this and do something else, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to study, I'm not going to meditate. Take some time off. This is too much. I need to go talk to my therapist. I'm tired of talking to that old man.
Is there any trace of sanity in the midst of warfare?
If you see what warfare is, that is sanity.
How do you see that when you're fighting intensely?
There again, I think it's through the awareness of the warfare. It's the awareness of the fight. It's the awareness of the texture of it rather than the cause. If you go to the cause, you're just going to find another cause for that cause. You'll find cause after cause after cause without any crows.
can you abide in the midst of that warfare without fueling it? How can we find the oxygen to see the sanity there?
I think you're doing it. It's just a matter of continuing. That's why it's called a path. It will become a path until you vanish, the path vanishes, and everything is seen to be just this, both separated and not separate. And there's really nothing left to do unless somebody needs your help, and then you do what? Help them where they're at. Go ahead.
How does pouring gasoline on a fire help put a fire out? That's what it feels like. I feel like I'm fueling my warfare.
You're actually witnessing the fueling. Quite often people fuel the warfare, which you've done in the past, fuel the warfare and not be aware of the fueling until after you look back on it. Then you see it, kind of as they call hindsight. But to actually see it while you're doing it, you're getting closer to understanding the dynamics that are there, the causes and conditions that arise as your particular neurosis, passion, aggression, ignorance, or as mine or as anyone else's. You just need to see it. You don't need to get rid of it.
What does seeing it mean?
What does it mean?
If I'm sitting there and it feels like I'm wanting to kill people, or I'm putting fuel on my intense negativity, or trying to find ways to act out of how I feel, what does that mean to see that without manipulating it?
I think what you're describing here, even though you're asking a question, I think what you're describing is the way the path looks to you right now. And it's kind of a bummer, or difficult, or stressful. And I would say just keep going. Because if someone is in a canoe and paddling upstream and they say, how do I navigate? I'm standing on the shore and I'm watching them. And I know all about canoes. I gave them the canoe. And they're saying, how do I do? What do I do? What about these? I just say, one thing is really good, is you're aimed in the right direction, upstream. That's a start. You're in a very cheerful mood today, aren't you? So anyway, I see that and I say, keep going. You're in there and it looks like I'm in there with you, or it looks like we're both in canoes, or it looks like there is no canoe, or it could look like any number of things. But what I see is not that I don't feel sad about your discontent or your difficulty. I also know that I can't assuage that particularly, and wouldn't, because that's the very area you need to look into. Go ahead.
How do we respect other people's warfares without using that to fuel our own negativity?
Keep your mouth shut. In other words, and in the same words, keep your mouth shut. Don't interpret for someone else what's happening with them, or what you're going through. Don't interpret.
How do you do that when you've been put in a relative position of authority?
Slowly. Because you're not only working with your own situation, you're working with that of others coming and going, like being in this temple, monastery, working with other people. Can be challenging, can be difficult. So the other thing that comes right out of the sutras is don't set up standards. We have standards. This needs to be done, that needs to be done. But when it's not lived up to, then it's also mutual. It's not. We don't work with. What I'm saying is, something goes wrong and we blame or we come down on someone for something not being done particularly the way that we want. I'm not sure where you're going with that, but it seems like it's in that area. Maybe something else. Anything else? Thank you. So we're to the daily Dharma gathering time, or?
We might have time for a couple questions.
Okay, yes, questions out here about the idea of the interview. Bailey?
More so thinking off of, piggybacking off of one of Unyo's questions about distraction.
Yes, a little louder, please.
Is the mind the only sense that can get distracted?
Well, I think it can show up in different ways because the mind and the whole six sense fields are interacting. You know, it's the Yogacharans have broken it down into 8 different aspects: the 5 sense fields, the 6th of the thinking process, the 7th of the ego mind, and the 8th of the storehouse. And so I think it's probably the mind or the mentation that's going on that can get locked onto one thing and then forget about something else. So it's actually distracted by what it gets disturbed by. You have a further question about that?
I guess I was just wondering if distraction can show up in the first 5 sense consciousnesses.
I think it could manifest there, but I don't think it does that without the thinking process. The thinking process, especially the 6th consciousness, is the one that makes it feel like whatever you smell and whatever you see, it's the same consciousness that's doing that. You know, I'm the one who's smelling that flower. So you don't have a fragrance that you don't know you don't have any identity for that. There's an identity that is based on the polarity of a sense field, a sense object, a sense consciousness, and a sense organ. And then there's 6 of them, including the mind, and those are operating all together. And that's why it also is, there's an illusion of a separate being. This is what takes us into all kinds of various kinds of journeys, trying to get this, get that. That's why some people will never do what we're doing here. Even if you brought them in and sat them down and made them listen to half a dozen Dharma talks, they would still go, no, I'm not, I'm going to join the Peace Corps. I've got to help people. I can't be sitting here rotting in front of a wall. They have ideas, opinions about it based on thoughts coming, going, ideas, conditioning. They don't realize that they are conditioned. We're all conditioned. And so liberation is about you could say it this way, a breakthrough. It actually breaks through so you're operating out of not so much out of conditionality, some, but not completely anymore. So therefore you don't know what's going to happen next. More?
I think I remember you saying at one point that the smelling process doesn't think that it thinks, but the thinking process thinks that it smells.
Yes.
Something to that effect.
Something like that, yeah.
What then does the thinking process do without the other senses?
Thinks up stuff. Dreaming. As soon as you close your eyes, even if you're on the cushion or whatever, as soon as you close your eyes for any length of time, we immediately start to dream. And we dream about, have you ever had a dream that you smell something? Yeah. Once I had a dream, I've told this a few times, about, I dreamt that a fly was crawling up my mouth and crawled into my mouth, and I bit down on the fly, and it was the most horrible, foul taste. When I woke up, it was completely gone. So it shows you how it really wasn't anything there. It was the dream of the taste. The dream taste was more intense than, eating poo-poo. Go ahead.
So what's tasting there?
Huh?
What's tasting there?
Yeah, what is? Find out. Rather than have me say what you think, reflect on that and think, I could give you an answer, but if I give you an answer, then that doesn't serve your investigation. Find out what that is. I've written a whole book on it. Not really. But I could, you could too. Any of us could sit and take something like that and just start making up stuff about anything. This is what most books are. People make up stuff about everything. They look at something and make up things about it. Look at something else and make up things about that. It's just like I've been looking at doing this for 45 plus years. And so I make up stuff about what this looks like. And you guys are foolish enough to come in here and listen to me. Yes, sir. Billy.
So you said warfare is sanity?
Oh, did I?
So, yeah,
So what I'm saying is that to see that something is warfare is sanity. If the warfare is happening and you see it, you see this is warfare. I mean, it's not so much the label of warfare, but seeing, even before you label it, there's come to some kind of sense that there's intense resistance and fighting and opposition. There's the very reality itself has broken off in two pieces and is at war with itself. The war against the war against the North and the South was a brother against brother. Was it characterized as? Yes, go ahead.
So I can understand that kind of in a way. It's saying like it's pointless to seek resolution. But have you felt peace in the middle of warfare? Because that's
peace. Seeing what warfare is peace.
Seeing what warfare is.
It is peace. But it has to happen. It can't be a concept that we distribute. I can't say that unless I understand. I'm not saying it as an opinion or a concept. If you disagree, I'll lose. That's peace. If something comes to fight you, cave. But not cave out of fear or don't leave, but don't go to war with anything. And if you do, then just see that you're going to war. You can't hold on to, I no longer go to war. You can't hold on to some kind of identity that never goes to war. If you do, then you're, and that's another kind of delusion. If you're in this world, you're going to fight with something. What's important is be aware of what you're fighting with. I just fought with a plumber this morning. In my head. Got that out of the way. Now I don't have to attack him for charging me too much money.
You have to, it's time.
Why are you pointing at my wrist? Oh, time. Oh, that thing. Yes. So we have to close now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So we'll stand and dedicate the merit of the facts of your book. And I'd just like to remind everybody, we do have donation boxes in the hallway. We'll both teacher and Sandra. So please help support us if you value these teachings. Every dollar helps.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Chiezan shi shi hu Chiezan bu sa wo ko sa wo ko ja oro mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.